I never thought my decision to install a heated driveway system would end with me standing in a courtroom watching HOA board members squirm under cross-examination. But here we are. My name is Quentin Wallace, and I'm a software engineer who moved to Riverside Meadows, a gated community in Boulder, Colorado, 3 years ago. The place seemed perfect when I bought my house, a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with mountain views and reasonable HOA fees. What I didn't realize was that the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association was run by a woman named Patricia Henderson, who took her volunteer position more seriously than most CEOs take running Fortune 500 companies. The trouble started in September 2024, right as I was planning my winter improvements. Colorado winters are brutal, and after spending 2 years shoveling snow at 5 in the morning before work, I decided to invest in a heated driveway system. It wasn't cheap, about $15,000 for the installation, but the radiant heating would melt snow automatically and save my back from the constant shoveling. My contractor, a guy named Steve who'd done similar work throughout Boulder County, assured me it was a straightforward installation that would pay for itself in convenience alone. I submitted my application to the HOA Architectural Review Committee like I was supposed to. The form asked for details about exterior modifications, and while the heating elements would be buried under my driveway pavers, I figured transparency was the best policy. I included diagrams, contractor information, and even energy efficiency ratings showing the system used less power than you'd think. 2 weeks later, I got my response: denied. The letter, signed by Patricia Henderson in her capacity as HOA president, stated that heated driveways were unnecessarily ostentatious displays of wealth that create inequality among neighbors and violate the community's commitment to modest, uniform appearances. I read that line 3 times, trying to understand how something buried underground could be ostentatious. The heating elements would be invisible. There would be no visible difference to my driveway except that it wouldn't have snow on it. I called the HOA office the next morning. Patricia answered on the 3rd ring, her voice already carrying that particular tone of someone who enjoys saying no. "Miss Henderson, this is Quentin Wallace from 847 Maple Ridge Drive. I'm calling about my heated driveway application." "Yes, Mr. Wallace. I trust you received our decision." "I did, but I'm confused about the reasoning. The system is completely underground. Nobody would even know it's there except that my driveway would be clear." "That's precisely the problem," Patricia said, and I could hear her shifting papers on her desk. "Your clear driveway while your neighbors are shoveling creates a visible disparity. It makes other residents feel inadequate. But that's like saying I can't have a snowblower because other people use shovels. Snowblowers are permitted under Section 7.3 of the HOA bylaws. Heated driveways are not mentioned, which means they fall under prohibited modifications." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my frustration in check. The bylaws say anything not explicitly prohibited is allowed pending architectural review. That's the whole point of the review process. The Architectural Review Committee has broad discretion to maintain community standards. Our decision is final. Good day, Mr. Wallace. She hung up before I could respond. I spent the next week researching Colorado HOA law. I discovered that while HOAs do have significant power, they can't be completely arbitrary in their decisions. Their rules have to be applied consistently and can't violate state law. I also found out that energy-efficient improvements were actually protected under Colorado's solar rights law, and while heated driveways weren't specifically mentioned, the principle seemed applicable. Armed with this information, I wrote a formal appeal letter. I cited the relevant statutes, pointed out that other homes in the neighborhood had various modifications like decorative shutters and upgraded landscaping that also created visual differences, and requested a hearing before the full board. Patricia's response came back, even faster this time. Appeal denied. No hearing granted. And now there was a threat. If I installed the system without approval, I would face immediate fines of $200 per day until it was removed, plus all legal costs associated with enforcement, $200 per day. That was $6,000 a month. I consulted with a real estate attorney named Marcus Chen, who had experience with HOA disputes. He reviewed my documents in his office downtown, occasionally shaking his head. "They're overreaching," he said, tapping my appeal letter. "But fighting this could cost you $10,000 to $20,000 in legal fees, and there's no guarantee you'd win. Sometimes HOAs back down when they see you're serious, but this Henderson woman sounds like the type who'd rather spend the association's money on lawyers than admit she's wrong. So what do I do? You could install the system and fight the fines in court. You could try to recall the board, but that requires 20% of homeowners to sign a petition, and most people don't want to get involved. Or you could just drop it and keep shoveling." None of those options sounded good, but Marcus's mention of backing down gave me an idea. What if I installed a different system that achieved the same goal but fell outside the HOA's jurisdiction? I went back to Steve, my contractor, and explained the situation. "So you want snow melting without the driveway heating," he said, scratching his chin. "What about a geothermal heat pump system for your house that happens to run a circulation loop under your driveway? Is that different, legally maybe? You'd be installing an HVAC system for your home, which the HOA can't regulate since it's about your house's mechanical systems, not exterior appearance. The fact that some of the piping runs under your driveway is just part of the installation layout." It seemed like a technical distinction, but I was desperate. Steve drew up new plans for a geothermal system that would actually heat and cool my entire house while also running loops under the driveway. It was more expensive, about $25,000 total, but I'd save on heating and cooling costs year-round. And technically, I'd be installing an HVAC system, which didn't require HOA approval under the bylaws. I didn't submit a new application. I just hired Steve and we started work in October. The installation took 3 weeks. Steve's crew had to drill the geothermal wells, install the heat pump in my basement, and run all the piping. When they tore up my driveway to run the loops underneath, a few neighbors asked what was happening. I told them the truth. I was installing a new heating and cooling system for my house. Patricia showed up on the second week of work. I was in my garage when her silver Lexus pulled into my driveway, blocking the construction crew's truck. She got out wearing a cream-colored pantsuit and sunglasses, even though it was overcast. "Mr. Wallace, what is the meaning of this?" She gestured at the torn-up driveway where Steve's crew was laying pipes. "I'm installing a geothermal HVAC system." "This looks like the heated driveway we rejected." "It's not. It's a home heating and cooling system. The pipes under the driveway are part of the geothermal loop field, totally within my rights as a homeowner." Patricia's mouth tightened. "You're deliberately circumventing the HOA's authority." "I'm making improvements to my home's mechanical systems, which don't require HOA approval. It's all in Section 4 of the bylaws. We'll see about that." She pulled out her phone and took photos of everything: the torn-up driveway, the crew, the equipment. Steve watched from where he was supervising, smart enough not to engage. After Patricia left, Steve walked over. "That's going to be trouble. Let it be trouble. I'm not breaking any rules. The crew finished the installation by mid-November. My driveway looked exactly the same as before. Same pavers, same layout, same color. The only difference was the heat pump humming quietly in my basement and the geothermal wells buried in my backyard. Steve walked me through the system controls, showing me how to adjust the house temperature and, separately, how to activate the driveway heating when snow was forecast. Just remember, he said, the driveway heating draws extra power, so use it smartly. Turn it on when snow's coming, and it'll keep things clear. The first snow came in late November, 6 inches overnight. I activated the driveway system before bed, and by morning my driveway was completely clear while my neighbors were outside scraping and shoveling. It was glorious. It was also apparently infuriating to Patricia. The letter arrived 3 days later. The HOA was fining me $200 per day for installing an unauthorized heated driveway system, retroactive to the date of installation. They demanded I disable the system immediately and pay accumulated fines of $14,000. I called Marcus Chen again. They can't do this, I said, pacing my living room with the letter in hand. It's a geothermal HVAC system. They have no authority over it. Forward me the letter and all your documentation. We're going to fight this. Marcus sent a response letter that was a masterpiece of legal writing. He explained in excruciating detail how geothermal HVAC systems work, cited Colorado law protecting homeowners' rights to install energy-efficient heating systems, and pointed out that the HOA's bylaws explicitly exempted mechanical systems from architectural review. He concluded by demanding the HOA withdraw the fines and cease all harassment or face a lawsuit for exceeding their authority. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. December brought more snow and colder temperatures. I used my driveway heating strategically, turning it on during storms and shutting it off when the weather was clear. My electric bill went up, but not as much as I'd feared, and the convenience was worth every penny. I wasn't breaking my back shoveling at dawn. I wasn't slipping on ice walking to my car. I wasn't scraping my windshield for 20 minutes. Meanwhile, the rest of Riverside Meadows was dealing with a brutal winter. We had snow events almost every week, and temperatures regularly dropped below zero at night. I'd see my neighbors out there at 6 in the morning, bundled up like Arctic explorers, chipping away at ice that had frozen solid overnight. Patricia lived 4 houses down from me, and I noticed she never did her own shoveling. She had a service that came through, though they were often late because they had so many clients. More than once I saw her standing in her doorway, phone pressed to her ear, clearly complaining about the delay. The HOA's response to Marcus's letter came in mid-December. They weren't backing down. Instead, they'd hired their own attorney, a firm called Davidson and Associates that specialized in HOA representation. Their letter argued that my system was clearly intended primarily as a driveway heater, and that the whole geothermal HVAC angle was a pretense. They demanded I submit to an inspection of the system by an engineer of their choosing at my expense, or face escalating fines and a lawsuit. They're bluffing, Marcus said when we met to discuss it. They don't want to go to court because they'll lose, but they're hoping you'll give up. I'm not giving up. Then we wait. They'll either drop it or they'll sue, and if they sue, we'll win. Christmas came and went. I flew back to Ohio to visit my parents for a few days, and when I returned, there was another notice from the HOA. This time, they were threatening to place a lien on my property for unpaid fines, which had now supposedly reached $24,000. A lien would make it impossible to sell or refinance my house. It was a serious threat, and it was making me genuinely angry. I'd spent $30,000 on a legitimate home improvement that saved energy and made my life easier, and I was being treated like a criminal for it. I told Marcus to prepare for litigation. If the HOA wanted a fight, they'd get one. Then the polar vortex hit. On January 8, 2025, weather forecasts started warning about an unprecedented cold snap heading toward Colorado. Temperatures were expected to drop to 15 below zero, possibly colder with wind chill. The news urged everyone to protect their pipes, keep their homes heated, and avoid unnecessary travel. I made sure my geothermal system was running optimally. One advantage of geothermal heating is that it works great even in extreme cold, because it's pulling heat from underground where the temperature is constant. I set my house to a comfortable 70 degrees and turned on the driveway heating to prevent any ice buildup. The cold hit on January 10th, and it was worse than predicted. The temperature dropped to 18 below zero that night, and with wind chill, it felt like 30 below. I stayed inside, warm and comfortable, occasionally looking out my window at the clear driveway and the ice forming on everyone else's. That's when things started going wrong for my neighbors. The next morning, I heard shouting outside. I looked out to see my neighbor across the street, Donald, standing in his yard in his pajamas and boots, staring at water gushing from his basement window well. A pipe had frozen and burst, and now freezing water was flooding his basement. I threw on clothes and went to help. By the time I got there, 3 other neighbors were also dealing with burst pipes. The extreme cold had overwhelmed the heating in their homes, especially in crawl spaces and exterior walls, and pipes were failing all over the neighborhood. Patricia's house was one of them. I saw her standing in her front yard, wrapped in an expensive-looking parka, screaming into her phone. Water was running down her driveway, already starting to freeze into a treacherous ice slick. Over the next 3 days, the situation in Riverside Meadows became a disaster. 27 homes out of the neighborhood's 63 houses reported burst pipes. The local plumbers were overwhelmed, with wait times stretching to a week or more. People were using shop vacs and buckets to manage flooding. Some families had to move to hotels because the water damage was so severe. My house was fine. The geothermal system kept everything at a perfect temperature, and the driveway heating even prevented the kind of ice dams that were forming on other houses and causing additional damage. I helped where I could, lending shop vacs and space heaters to neighbors, offering hot coffee and my warm house as a refuge. Most people were grateful. Patricia was not. She showed up at my door on January 13th, after the temperatures had finally risen back above zero. Her face was red and not from the cold. "This is your fault," she said the moment I opened the door. "Excuse me. Your heated driveway system. It's drawing power from the neighborhood grid, causing voltage drops that affected everyone's heating systems. That's why the pipes froze. You did this." I stared at her, genuinely shocked by the accusation. "That's not how electrical grids work, Patricia. My system is connected to my house's power supply. It has zero effect on your electricity. Our engineer will prove otherwise. And when we do, you'll be liable for every bit of damage in this neighborhood. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Your engineer is going to have a hard time proving something that's physically impossible. We'll see." She turned and marched back to her car, which was parked on the street because her driveway was covered in ice. I called Marcus immediately and told him what happened. "She's desperate," he said. "Her house got damaged, probably badly based on what you're describing, and she's looking for someone to blame. Document everything every interaction, every working system in your house. This is about to get worse before it gets better." He was right. The lawsuit came on January 20th. The Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association filed a complaint in Boulder County District Court, alleging that my unauthorized and illegal installation of a heated driveway system had caused electrical disruptions that led to heating system failures throughout the neighborhood, resulting in extensive water damage from burst pipes. They were suing me for $340,000 in damages. $340,000. I sat in Marcus's office reading the complaint, feeling my blood pressure rising with every paragraph. The accusations were insane. They claimed I'd installed an industrial-grade heating system that drew massive amounts of power. They said I'd bypassed normal permitting processes. They even suggested I'd been negligent in activating the system during the cold snap, knowing it would harm my neighbors. "This is garbage," I said, dropping the papers on Marcus's desk. "Every word of this is a lie." "Yes, but it's a lie filed in court, which means we have to respond." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "The good news is that this is so ridiculous we can probably get it dismissed fairly quickly. The bad news is that it'll still cost you money and time. Can we countersue? Potentially, for legal fees and harassment. Let's see how the case develops." Marcus filed our response in early February, denying all allegations and providing detailed documentation of my geothermal system, including electrical specifications showing it drew no more power than a typical home HVAC system. We included affidavits from Steve, my contractor, and the manufacturer of the heat pump. We also submitted my electrical bills showing normal usage patterns. The HOA's response was to double down. They hired an expert witness, some guy named Dr. Raymond Foster, who claimed to be an electrical engineer, who wrote a report saying my system could theoretically cause power fluctuations in the neighborhood. "Could theoretically," I said when Marcus showed me the report. "I could theoretically be struck by lightning tomorrow. That doesn't mean someone's liable for it." "Dr. Foster's report is garbage," Marcus agreed. "He's making assumptions without any actual testing or data. We'll tear him apart in deposition. Discovery was a nightmare." The HOA demanded copies of every document related to my system, every email, every text message. They wanted records of when I activated the heating, my power bills going back 2 years, even my home purchase documents. Marcus advised me to cooperate fully, so I spent weeks gathering everything they requested. In return, we demanded the HOA's records. We wanted their financial documents, meeting minutes, communications about me and my system, and records of the actual pipe damage throughout the neighborhood. That's when things got interesting. The HOA's records showed that Patricia had been obsessed with my driveway since the original application. She'd sent dozens of emails to other board members about it, calling me arrogant and defiant and saying I needed to be made an example of. The meeting minutes showed she'd personally pushed for the maximum fines and had argued against any compromise. More importantly, the damage records told a different story than the lawsuit claimed. Most of the houses with burst pipes had older plumbing systems and inadequate insulation. Several had previous issues with frozen pipes in past winters. And critically, the electrical company's records showed 0 power fluctuations or outages in Riverside Meadows during the cold snap. Patricia's own house had been cited for code violations 2 years earlier for insufficient insulation in the crawl space. She'd apparently never fixed it. "They have no case," Marcus said, spreading the documents across his conference table. "Their expert is a joke. Their damage claims are fraudulent, and their HOA president has a documented vendetta against you. We're filing for summary judgment. Summary judgment is when you ask the court to throw out a case before trial because there's no genuine factual dispute, and you're entitled to win as a matter of law. It's hard to get, but Marcus thought we had a shot. We filed our motion in April, supported by a mountain of evidence. We showed that my system couldn't possibly cause electrical problems. We showed that the HOA's damage claims were inflated and unrelated to my system. We showed Patricia's bias and harassment. We even included an affidavit from an electrical engineer who explained in simple terms why the HOA's theory was nonsense. The hearing was scheduled for May 15, 2025. Meanwhile, life in Riverside Meadows had become tense. Some neighbors supported me, recognizing that the lawsuit was absurd. Others sided with the HOA, either because they believed the lies or because they didn't want to rock the boat. A few people stopped talking to me entirely. Patricia ramped up her harassment. She sent violations notices for trivial things like my trash, cans being visible from the street 15 minutes before pickup, or grass being 1 inch taller than the HOA's arbitrary limit. Each violation came with threats of fines. I documented everything and added it to our growing file of evidence showing the HOA's retaliation. The summary judgment hearing was held in Boulder County District Court before Judge Sarah Martinez. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Marcus while the HOA's attorneys, 2 lawyers from Davidson and Associates named Gregory Davidson and Jennifer Schultz, sat opposite us. Judge Martinez was in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She'd clearly read all the briefs because she started asking pointed questions immediately. "Mr. Davidson," she said, looking at the HOA's lead attorney, "help me understand your theory of liability. You're claiming Mr. Wallace's heating system caused electrical problems, but I don't see any evidence of actual electrical problems in the record." Gregory Davidson stood, adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, the power company's records wouldn't necessarily show the kind of localized voltage variations we're talking about. Dr. Foster's report explains how these micro fluctuations can occur. Dr. Foster's report says it could theoretically happen. Do you have any evidence that it did happen? The timing is compelling, Your Honor. The pipes burst during the same period Mr. Wallace was running his system." "The pipes burst during an extreme cold snap," Judge Martinez said. "Correlation isn't causation, Mr. Davidson." "Where's your proof of a causal link?" Davidson fumbled through his notes. "We believe that discovery of Mr. Wallace's system's technical specifications will prove. You've had 6 months of discovery. You've examined his system, his power bills, everything. What specific evidence do you have?" "The circumstantial evidence is strong, Your Honor." Judge Martinez looked at Jennifer Schultz. "Counselor, do you have anything to add?" Schultz stood, looking more prepared than her colleague. "Your Honor, we believe this case raises questions of fact appropriate for a jury. The extent of damages, the proximate cause, these are classic jury questions." "Not if there's no evidence supporting your theory," Judge Martinez said. She turned to Marcus. "Mr. Chen," Marcus stood smoothly, "Your Honor, this case should never have been filed. The HOA has no evidence because there is no evidence. My client installed a legal, safe, energy-efficient heating system for his home. The HOA didn't like it because of personal animosity, as shown by the documents we've submitted. When a natural disaster caused pipe damage throughout the neighborhood, including to homes without any connection to my client, the HOA president saw an opportunity for revenge. This lawsuit is harassment, pure and simple. What about the HOA's authority to regulate home modifications? Judge Martinez asked. They have no authority over mechanical systems, Your Honor. That's explicit in their own bylaws, which we've cited. And even if they did, they can't fine someone for a system that complies with all applicable laws and building codes. Judge Martinez nodded slowly, making notes. I'll take this under advisement. You'll have my ruling within 2 weeks. We left the courthouse feeling cautiously optimistic. Marcus thought Judge Martinez was skeptical of the HOA's case, but you never knew for sure until the ruling came down. The ruling arrived on May 28th. Judge Martinez granted our motion for summary judgment, dismissing the HOA's lawsuit in its entirety. Her written order was scathing. She found that the HOA had failed to provide any credible evidence of causation between my heating system and the pipe damage. She noted that Dr. Foster's speculative report fails to meet basic standards for expert testimony. She pointed out that numerous other factors, including inadequate insulation, aging infrastructure, and an unprecedented weather event, more plausibly explain the damages. Most satisfyingly, she wrote that the evidence suggests this lawsuit was motivated by personal animus rather than legitimate concerns, raising serious questions about the HOA's use of homeowner funds to pursue frivolous litigation. She ordered the HOA to pay my attorney's fees and costs. I was ecstatic. Marcus was professional but clearly pleased. This is about as complete a victory as you can get, he said, but we weren't done yet. With the lawsuit dismissed, Marcus advised me to countersue the HOA for harassment, abusive process, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We also filed complaints with the Colorado HOA Regulatory Office about Patricia's conduct. The countersuit, filed in June 2025, laid out everything: Patricia's personal vendetta, the frivolous fines, the retaliatory violations notices, and the baseless lawsuit. We sought damages for my legal fees, emotional distress, and punitive damages to deter future misconduct. The HOA's insurance company got involved at this point. They'd covered the HOA's legal fees for the first lawsuit, but they weren't happy about being dragged into a countersuit based on what was obviously personal misconduct by a board member. In July, I got a call from a lawyer representing the HOA's insurance carrier. They wanted to settle. The settlement negotiations took place in August. The insurance company was willing to pay $50,000 to make the case go away, plus they'd require the HOA to drop all fines against me and issue a formal apology. What about Patricia? I asked Marcus during one of our strategy sessions. What about her? Does she face any consequences? She should resign, but we can't force that as part of the settlement. However, the HOA's insurance company is likely putting pressure on the board to remove her. They're not going to want to cover an HOA with a president who creates this kind of liability. The settlement was finalized on September 3rd, 2025. I received $50,000, more than enough to cover my legal expenses with money left over. The HOA officially withdrew all fines and violations notices related to my heating system. And they issued a letter, signed by the entire board, acknowledging that my geothermal HVAC system was properly installed and within my rights as a homeowner. Patricia's name was notably absent from the letter. She'd resigned from the HOA board in August, reportedly under pressure from both the insurance company and other board members who were furious about the wasted money and legal exposure she'd created. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she and her husband were selling their house and moving out of Riverside Meadows. The water damage from the burst pipes had been extensive, and between that and the stress of the lawsuit, They were done with Colorado winters. The new HOA board was much more reasonable. They actually reached out to me in October to apologize personally and to ask if I'd be willing to serve on the Architectural Review Committee. I declined, but appreciated the gesture. They also revised the HOA's bylaws to explicitly allow energy-efficient home improvements like geothermal systems, solar panels, and yes, even heated driveways, subject to reasonable aesthetic guidelines. Several neighbors asked me for Steve's contact information. 2 of them installed geothermal systems similar to mine the following spring. The irony of the whole situation wasn't lost on me. Patricia had tried so hard to stop me from having something she thought was unfair or ostentatious, and in the end, her obsession had cost the HOA tens of thousands in legal fees, earned her personal humiliation, and prompted several other neighbors to install the same systems she'd opposed. But the real consequences came later, and they were more serious than any of us expected. In November 2025, I got a call from a detective with the Boulder Police Department. His name was Detective Michael Torres, and he wanted to talk to me about the HOA lawsuit. "I'm confused," I said when he explained why he was calling. "The lawsuit is over. We settled months ago." "I'm not calling about the civil case," Detective Torres said. "I'm calling about potential criminal conduct. Can we meet?" We met at a coffee shop in downtown Boulder. Detective Torres was in his 40s, wearing a sport coat and carrying a notebook. He ordered a black coffee and got right to business. "We've been investigating financial irregularities at the Riverside Meadows HOA," he said. "Your lawsuit and the subsequent settlement flagged some issues that caught our attention. We've been digging into the HOA's finances, and we've found evidence of embezzlement." "Embezzlement? By who?" "Patricia Henderson. Over the past 4 years, she's systematically stolen approximately $120,000 from the HOA's operating accounts." I sat back stunned. "How?" "Various methods. Fake vendor invoices, payments to shell companies she controlled, unauthorized salary increases for herself. She was sophisticated about it, spreading it out over time so it wasn't immediately obvious. But when we started looking closely, the pattern became clear." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're a witness. Your lawsuit generated a lot of documentation about the HOA's finances and operations. We need to review those records as part of our investigation. We also need you to testify to the grand jury about Patricia's conduct and her use of HOA resources to pursue personal vendettas." I agreed immediately. Marcus helped me prepare for the grand jury testimony, which happened in December 2025. The grand jury indicted Patricia Henderson on 18 counts of theft, embezzlement, and fraud. The local news covered the story, running headlines like "Former HOA President Accused of Stealing $120,000" and "Homeowner Dispute Exposes Massive Embezzlement Scheme." Patricia's trial was scheduled for spring 2026, but her attorney negotiated a plea deal. In January 2026, she pleaded guilty to multiple felony counts in exchange for a sentence of 4 years in prison and full restitution to the HOA. The sentencing hearing was on February 12, 2026. I attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom. Patricia looked smaller somehow, diminished in her simple gray dress, her hair no longer perfectly styled. The judge, a stern man named Judge Patrick O'Brien, wasn't sympathetic. "Miss Henderson, you held a position of trust in your community," he said. "Homeowners relied on you to manage their collective resources responsibly. Instead, you stole from them, systematically and deliberately, for your own benefit. And when a homeowner challenged your authority, You used association resources to pursue a vindictive and baseless lawsuit against him. Your conduct represents a profound betrayal of your neighbor's trust. He sentenced her to 4 years in the Colorado Department of Corrections, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. She'd have to pay back the full $120,000 plus interest. And she'd be prohibited from serving on any HOA board or in any position of trust over others' finances. Patricia's husband filed for divorce 3 weeks later. As for me, life in Riverside Meadows returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. The HOA elected a new board that actually seemed interested in serving the community rather than wielding petty power. They organized neighborhood events, negotiated better contracts with service vendors, and generally made the place more pleasant to live in. My geothermal system worked perfectly through the winter of 2025-2026. When we had another cold snap in January, my house stayed warm and my driveway stayed clear. This time, nobody complained. A few neighbors even stood in their driveways, shoveling snow, and gave me friendly waves. I helped Donald, the neighbor who'd had the worst pipe damage in the 2025 freeze, install better insulation in his crawl space. He thanked me by bringing over homemade tamales from his wife's family recipe. The settlement money, after legal fees, left me with about $30,000. I donated $10,000 to a local charity that helped low-income homeowners with emergency repairs, specifically thinking about people who couldn't afford to deal with disasters like burst pipes. With the rest, I upgraded my home office setup and took a vacation to Hawaii, something I'd been putting off for years. Looking back on the whole ordeal, I'm struck by how unnecessary all of it was. If Patricia had just approved my original heated driveway application, or even if she'd denied it for legitimate reasons and we'd worked something out, none of the subsequent disaster would have happened. The lawsuit, the embezzlement investigation, her prison sentence, all of it traced back to her need to control something that was none of her business. I learned a lot through the process, mostly about standing up for yourself when someone tries to abuse authority they don't actually have. I learned that documentation is crucial, that good legal representation matters, and that sometimes doing the right thing means being willing to fight even when it's expensive and stressful. I also learned that HOAs are only as good or bad as the people running them. A good board can make a neighborhood better. A bad board, or even just one bad board member with too much power, can make everyone's life miserable. The Riverside Meadows HOA commissioned an independent audit after Patricia's arrest. The audit found that the association's finances were actually in worse shape than anyone knew. Between Patricia's embezzlement and her wasteful spending on frivolous legal actions, the HOA's reserve fund was nearly depleted. The new board had to levy a special assessment, an extra fee on all homeowners, to rebuild the reserves. Everyone had to pay $1,200. Some neighbors grumbled about it, but most understood it was necessary to fix the damage Patricia had caused. A few people approached me at the HOA's annual meeting in March 2026 and apologized for not supporting me during the lawsuit. They'd been afraid to go against Patricia, or they'd believed her lies about my system causing the pipe damage. I appreciated the apologies and bore no grudges. Patricia had been good at manipulation and intimidation. I couldn't blame people for being intimidated. One positive outcome was that the whole fiasco prompted Colorado's legislature to pass new regulations on HOA governance. The law, which went into effect in July 2026, required HOAs to carry insurance specifically covering director misconduct, mandated annual financial audits, and made it easier for homeowners to recall board members who abused their authority. The law was informally called Henderson's Law in legal circles, though the official name was the Colorado Homeowners Association Accountability Act of 2026. Steve, my contractor, told me his business had boomed after news of the lawsuit went public. Apparently, people saw the story about the HOA suing me over my heating system and decided they wanted their own heated driveways as a form of quiet rebellion against overreaching HOAs. He'd installed 15 new systems in the past year, including 3 more in Riverside Meadows. In May 2026, I was contacted by a reporter from a national news outlet who was doing a story about HOA overreach. They'd heard about my case and wanted to interview me. The story ran in June, featuring my experience alongside several other homeowners who'd battled their HOAs over various issues. The article prompted a debate about HOA reform and whether these organizations had become too powerful. Some people argued HOAs were necessary to maintain property values and neighborhood standards. Others said they'd become petty tyrannies that needed more oversight. I fell somewhere in the middle. I thought HOAs could serve a legitimate purpose, but they needed transparency, accountability, and strict limits on their authority. Homeowners shouldn't have to hire lawyers and fight lengthy battles just to improve their own property. By July 2026, life had fully returned to normal. I was working on new software projects, enjoying my comfortable house with its excellent heating and cooling system, and generally not thinking much about the whole HOA drama. Then I got a letter from Patricia. It came from the Colorado Department of Corrections, addressed in careful handwriting. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was short, written on plain prison stationery. "Mr. Wallace, I'm writing to apologize for what I put you through. I was wrong to oppose your heating system, wrong to fine you, and especially wrong to involve the HOA in a lawsuit against you. I let my need for control and my pride override my common sense and my responsibility to the community. I've had a lot of time to think about my choices and the harm I caused. I stole from my neighbors, lied to people who trusted me, and used my position to bully you when you were just trying to improve your home. I'm genuinely sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I recognize what I did was wrong. I hope you're doing well. Sincerely, Patricia Henderson." I read the letter twice, trying to decide how I felt about it. Part of me was still angry at all the stress and expense she'd caused. But part of me felt something close to pity. She destroyed her own life over something that ultimately didn't matter. I didn't respond to the letter, but I didn't throw it away either. I filed it with all the other documents from the case, a strange bookend to the whole experience. In August 2026, the Riverside Meadows HOA held a summer barbecue in the community park. It was a beautiful day, warm sun, clear skies, mountains visible in the distance. Families brought food to share, kids ran around playing, and neighbors who'd been living next to each other for years actually talked and got to know one another. I brought potato salad and hung out near the grills, chatting with Donald and his wife Maria about their plans to remodel their kitchen. Steve showed up with his family, and we talked shop about new geothermal technology coming on the market. The new HOA president, a retired teacher named Ellen Morrison, gave a short speech thanking everyone for coming and emphasizing the board's commitment to transparency and community engagement. She didn't mention Patricia or the lawsuit, but everyone knew what she was referring to. "We're a community," Ellen said. "That means we work together, we respect each other's differences, and we don't let disagreements destroy relationships." This past year has been challenging, but I think we've learned from it and we're stronger for it. People applauded politely. I joined in, meaning it. As the sun set and families started packing up to head home, I stood in the park looking at my neighborhood. It really was beautiful here, the well-maintained houses, the mature trees, the mountain views. I'd nearly let Patricia drive me away from all this with her petness and harassment. I was glad I'd stayed. I was glad I'd fought. Walking back to my house that evening, my driveway looking perfectly normal in the fading light, nobody would ever guess what that innocent-looking stretch of pavers had caused. But I knew, and I carried the knowledge like a badge of honor. Sometimes standing up for yourself matters. Sometimes the small battles are worth fighting. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, staying warm, and letting the snow melt away while small-minded people exhaust themselves trying to control things that were never theirs to control in the first place. I never had another problem with the HOA. My geothermal system continued running perfectly, keeping my house comfortable year-round and my driveway clear in winter. The whole experience had cost me time, money, and stress, but it had also taught me about resilience, about knowing when to compromise and when to stand firm, and about the importance of good neighbors who support each other. Patricia served her time. The HOA recovered financially. Life went on. And every winter, when the snow started falling and my driveway stayed clear, I smiled and thought about how such a small thing had exposed so much corruption and changed so many lives. The heated system controversy was finally, completely over. But the lessons from it would stay with me and with Riverside Meadows for years to come.